Why shoot an S-Log? I think I know, but do I really? I want to explore the advantages of shooting an S-Log in comparison to some of the other picture profiles in the Sony a7IV and the Sony a7S III, and I thought that we could do it together. Actually, I had tried to make a video extolling the virtues of S-Log in comparison to some of the other picture profiles, but I realized I messed up a crucial component of the comparison, so I thought we could do it together. That way I could be more thorough and make sure I'm not missing anything. I'm going to compare PP off, S-Cinetone, and S-Log 3. Why PP off? Well, no reason in particular, except a couple of large-ish YouTubers whom I like tend to shoot in PP off with their Sony cameras for some reason. And what I didn't realize until making this video is in video mode, you have no control over the parameters in that profile. So nothing with sharpening, saturation, detail, crispening, nothing like that. So it is what it is. You get what you get. I guess it makes it a very simple picture profile for people who are just getting started. So that's another reason to include it in this comparison. I'm going to set up this talking head shot similar to what I always do in my YouTube videos in each picture profile, trying to get the best image I can using a combination of camera settings and lighting, but keeping in mind the native ISO values for each picture profile and also the ironclad rule of YouTube, shallow depth of field or die. So the lens aperture is going to stay at f1.8. Let's start off with PP off. I don't know what I meant about doing it together. I guess I had an idea in my head about how this video would go, but in trying to put it together, I realized that it probably wasn't a good idea. So here is me sped up, going through each picture profile, adjusting camera settings, and setting up the lighting for each, trying to get the best result. And I guess we'll just compare the results that I got. Couple things. I'm using OBS to capture the screen on the a7 IV. So as I make changes, I wanted you to be able to see the changes that I'm making. But for some reason on these stupid cameras, when you pass the information out over HDMI, you lose the screen on the camera. But if you do a clean feed, then you get to keep both. I don't understand why. So it made it extremely difficult for me to try to see the shot that I'm setting up because I'm looking at the monitor over here as opposed to the camera here. And the other thing is it doesn't show the zebras. So I was trying to rely on the zebras to make sure the exposure was right in all of the areas where I wanted it to be a certain way. So that's dumb. Sony, come on. Let's get this figured out. Anyway, so this is PP off. This is what it looks like. And I'm wearing kind of like, you know, bright hat and trying to have some really prominent colors in the shot. Actually, speaking of that, I want to set this light in the background to blue. So I want to have like a primary color and just see how each picture profile handles what should be a very pure blue. I don't have any red. I should have just set like a color chart on this back thing here. That might be a good idea. Hold on. I don't know. I guess it makes sense. I'm going to lower the brightness. Let me do that much. Normally, I obviously wouldn't have color bars in my shot, but we'll just use them for the purpose of this video. Hopefully it works. Okay, so this is PP off. I don't know what my hair looks like. I don't know if my collar is messed up. So this is S-Cinetone. That's that. Anyway, so here's S-Log. Putting that color chart in the background on the TV gave me the idea, why don't I just shoot the color chart individually? That way we can really compare how the colors are looking on each of these picture profiles. And I am aware this color chart is being displayed on a TV, so it's not necessarily accurate, it's not calibrated, but at least we'll have a comparison. This is the S-Log 3. I'm using the official Sony S-Log 3 S-Game at 3.Cine to Rec 709 LUT. So you can see Sony, and I'm using this one. And if I turn this node off, there is the straight out of camera log shot, and that's all I've done. And this node here is just cutting out the color chart. So it's not being influenced by anything else. So here is S-Log. It agrees with LG pretty well. Everything is lining up pretty closely to where it should be. Red is spot on, blue, cyan, yellow are all right in that box. Magenta is hitting the corner, and green is the only one that isn't stretching right into that corresponding box. So here is S-Cinetone. It's obviously shifted quite a bit from S-Log. Green is oversaturated, red is oversaturated. They're getting close, but also like check magenta out. It's like way down here. It's not even getting close to the box. All right, and now here's PP off. Red is also a little hot. Yellow's kind of hot too. Cyan not getting to the box. Green's a little shifted. Magenta not reaching into the box. And blue is kind of doing some weird things here too. If I had to give it to the one to being the most accurate and technically correct, it would be S-Log with the Sony Rec 709 LUT. Let's look at each of the shots and just try to do some corrections. So these are straight out of camera. We'll pull up all the scopes to see. And I'm just going to add, I'm probably not going to use any extra nodes. What I really want to do is just adjust the exposure and maybe contrast. So I'll just label that cont. This is PP off, and red is just way too saturated, way too much. Some of the clipping points of some of these profiles is beyond 100, and you can see over here on the parade and on the waveforms that we are losing some information here. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't captured. So we're going to go to the highlights here and pull this down, and you can see that you have that information there. So just because it's looking clipped on your waveforms initially doesn't mean that it's not there. So we can pull those highlights back, and you can see now in this window that we're not losing anything. Everything's looking pretty good. And looking at the shadows, you can see everything here is just bunched right up on 0. And if I try to lift them, you're not going to get any information back. You can see it's just kind of raising that floor, but it's not really giving you anything that you can't already see. It's just brightening it. So you could adjust that to taste. If you want to leave it pretty black, then you can do that. But lifting it's not really going to give you any more information. Maybe the midtone's a little brighter. One thing, okay, let's do this. I'm going to label this one skin. I'm not going to make any changes, but I just want to be able to see what the skin tones are looking like. I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm just going to, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to click on this instead. And I'm going to draw a little shape. Don't I look so happy? All right. And now watch this fancy trick. Whoa, hold on. Okay, there we go. And check out the vector scope. Pretty accurate skin tones. I'm going to crank the saturation just so you can see it better. That's pretty good. So skin tones, no real complaint. All right, let's move over to the next one. Should be S-Cinetone. Much less saturated in comparison, so nothing is going crazy. The only thing that's even hitting the box is blue. Blacks are already lifted in comparison to PP off. And we'll see what we have for highlights. And they're not clipped as much, but that also could have been just a result of the way that I exposed it. So we'll pull those down. This seems to be retaining that middle section of that light bar better, but it could have been just my exposure might have been better there. So I'm going to raise up the midtones a little bit and check the lift or the shadows. So we're not really getting information. Actually, what's happening is we're losing information as we're bringing that up. So watch down here. This little kind of triangle shape is actually going to compress as we lift the shadows. And then it's going to expand ever so slightly as you raise the shadows. So it's like you've got more information, just a little bit, like teensy tiny bit. But you can see that compression happening as you lift those shadows. So there's S-Cinetone, slight corrections, and let's take a look at what the skin tones look like here. Again, looks pretty good, pretty accurate. When you boost it, it looks like there's it's kind of curling off towards the red magenta a little bit more, but it's very slight differences. So surprised that they both render skin tones pretty close. All right, so now let's go over to S-Log. Create an extra node here. This last one I'm going to add the LUT to it. Come over to the LUTs folder, Sony, and there you go. So right out of the box, that's what that looks like. You can see the shadows are even lifted a little bit higher than S-Cinetone. So we're going to come and drop the highlights down and raise the midtones a little bit. I'm going to come to a frame where I don't look terrible. Now, so this is the key difference here. Watch the lift of the shadows here. So as you raise that, it's actually expanding the amount of information. And as you lower it, it's contracting or squishing the amount of information. You have more flexibility with S-Log because if we turn off the LUT, look where it's it's squishing everything. So nothing is being crushed at the bottom and nothing is being clipped at the top. So when you add the LUT, it all gets expanded out towards the extremes, but it was all captured. So you have the ability to basically just decide, how dark do you want it? How much information do you want to be able to see down here versus not? Let's wrap this up with a look at the skin tones for S-Log. Surprisingly, they all line up really well on the skin tone indicator. And I would say just very slightly, and you can really see this when you boost the saturation, where S-Log is straddling that line and it's sort of like equal parts red and yellow on either side. And you see the same with PP off. It seems to be equal red and yellow. And I would say the slight difference here with S-Cinetone is when you boost the saturation, it leans more to the red side and less to the yellow side. And that probably goes a fair way to explaining the kind of pleasing skin tones that S-Cinetone is. That's its reason for existence, essentially. It's very slight differences, but now you know. Now I know, and now you know. Now we both know. How to wrap this up? I don't know. This video's been all over the place in terms of conception, and there's so many different nuances to setting up these shots that I wanted to be able to show you, but the video was just going to be way too long and way too complicated. Maybe it would have worked better as a live stream, sort of like a live demo. If you're interested in that, let me know. I do need to start doing some more live streams. Anyway, my preconceived notion is that S-Log 3 is the best. I was surprised at just how similar all three ended up being. And as long as I took the time to try to get the exposure of each one as good as I could, and once I did that, they all looked very, very similar. You don't have to use S-Log, but what I hope I was still able to show you, at least with the color charts and just what the final images and how you can manipulate them, I still think S-Log is the best. S-Log was the most accurate, at least using the Sony LUT. And that's the other cool thing with S-Log is there's a lot of different ways that you can convert it to Rec. 709. But if you use the official Sony LUT, then you got really accurate results. It was the most accurate and it was also the most flexible. One of the questions that I had starting out this video that I wanted to maybe answer but probably didn't answer with the footage that I've shown you, wondering why people don't want to use S-Log, and I guess some of the reasons that I came up with is that it's too complicated, people don't understand the workflow, and maybe just looking at that washed out, nasty looking gray image, it's kind of like, what am I even doing here? What I wanted to be able to show you is that it's not complicated. The only thing you need to do is take a good Rec. 709 conversion LUT and add it to your footage. That's really all that it takes. As long as you expose the footage properly, then really that's the end of it. So there's a lot of different variables, but what I hope that you saw is basically three things. One, they all look very similar. Two, S-Log still is the most accurate and best. We'll come back to that. And three, S-Log is also the most flexible. Why did I say it's the best? Something about that PP off image, it seems flatter to me. It seems more like digital video looking, and I don't know how to quantify it because I showed you the scopes. There just seems to be more color separation in S-Log than PP off. And S-Cinetone, I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of S-Cinetone, but it's hard to quantify that. And that could just be my bias. The skin tones are softer. There's less like hot, just kind of little bits and garbagey things going on in the skin. Not very good description, but I'm not going to say it looks cinematic or it looks like filmic or anything like that. I just feel like it looks nicer. Has a nicer roll off. It's more pleasing. There's more color separation. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Which one did you like the best? Did you think there was a big difference between them? And if so, what were the differences that you noticed? And I hope you got something out of this video. I know it was all over the place and kind of a mess. I guess my brain is a mess.